Charlie B. is a longtime 12-stepper and member of the Apple Valley Burnsville EA group. Charlie graduated magna cum laude from Macalester College. He is founder of the Green Party of Minnesota and founding president of the Hay River Intentional Community. His 5 years as director of the Boys to Men Mentoring Network of Minnesota inspired him to do the award-winning documentary film Journeyman. He has 35 years in 12-step programs and 2 years in EA. He has also driven a city bus for the last 32 years. Playing frisbee golf, hiking, and traveling also keeps him happy. Let's welcome Charlie B.
Isn't it wonderful when something comes together? Hi guys, my name is Charlie and I'm powerless over my emotions. Well, I have 35 years in 12-step groups and it took that long before I got to this one, which is healing my core. And the process of getting here and being surprised that my heart is opening up, that I can accept the fact that I'm anxious right now and not have to fix it and do it perfectly, amazed me so much that I have been writing and thinking, what is different about EA than these other 12-step programs, so that I can know, and so that maybe we can know, how do we practice our program differently? Because the 12 steps are practiced differently, in my judgment, from program to program. Our personalities are different. What's different about how we're working it here that's finally getting to the point where we're comfortable being in our emotions and being present and not medicating and acting out? So my drug use started young, very young. And so I was 13 when I started doing drugs, and by the time I was 15 I was using every drug that was available except for heroin. And so I was wild. I was breaking into houses. I stole a train once and rode it into Minneapolis. Didn't hurt anybody, but I could have. I dropped trash cans in front of semi-trucks on the freeway. I was burning the village down. And I was lucky. My mom did the best thing that she could have done for me. She threw me into treatment. And so something hasn't changed for me. I'm a slow learner. So it took a whole year of me living away from my home, in treatment, and also in halfway houses, before I finally got to the point where the program was mine. Through NA and through AA programs, I got sober. But right away what happened was my slippery addiction shifted into another sector. If you can imagine that. And I also started to learn what a good group is. A good group has people that are practicing the steps. It has people who are practicing sponsorship. It has people who are practicing fellowship. My addiction shifted into yet another sector, work and busyness. And so the good news is that I took off in school. I got really successful. I got straight A's, and you know, there's a benefit to switching addictions and channeling your energy into a more positive direction, although you find out later what the consequence is. And so my busyness went out of control. I leapt into my recovery from drug addiction like a work addict. I was working the program as if it was a competition. I was going to be good at this, a star. I wanted to be a program diva. And so they give out these sobriety chips at meetings, and I was looking for more like something like, this year's Academy Award for Best Sobriety goes to Charlie B. for his performance as the former addict turned martyr. So, am I alone here? Is there anybody else here who has tried to work this program as perfectionist like that? Good, thank you, thank you. So there were good parts, like I said. I took off in schools, I got good grades. And so in the haze of my drug years, I pursued life, my pleasure, like a race car driver, trying to score a track record. But now the goal had changed, and everything that I leapt into, I did to demonstrate my magnificence. to become the new star center, in short, to gather all the attention in the world. My friends, my family, my wife now all knew that they'd get some of me, but not all of me. Everyone I knew knew that I was running all the time, and I actually was proud of the fact that people would say, just looking at him makes me tired. I was proud of that. But neither my body or my mind were designed for that. And so, of course, I soon started to become miserable. Nothing was ever enough. I was now overextended and absent. I didn't have time enough for family and friends. I was self-absorbed, nervous, hyper, still am, and over-serious. I didn't like my life, and I could actually see through the hollowness of the game that I was playing. I didn't like myself. So, work addiction was sticky for me. I'm not just addicted to work, I'm addicted to being busy all the time. This activity helps me to avoid facing my feelings. It's a medication like anything else. Anyone else have that? Keeping busy to not face your feelings?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a lot of on that one. So accomplishing things was a strategy that picked up to make me feel worthy and good enough. Recovery from my work addiction meant actually stopping and noticing this anxiety without doing something to feel better about myself. I was told that I did not need to cure cancer to win a gold medal or to become Superman in order to feel okay about myself. So I did eventually, with the help of the Workaholics Anonymous program, get balanced in my work life and started setting aside plenty of time for family and for play. I still do that. I keep a day every week that's date day, and my wife and I have a Sabbath that is nothing but play. Keep it every week. So now I had a lot of program experience, and I saw my life as kind of an ongoing journey that I had to keep going on for the sake of my spiritual survival and for my spiritual awakening. It felt like peeling back layers of the onion, more and more, going deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper cores of healing. The next compulsive behavior that I faced was codependency. And I want to talk about codependency especially because I think that it's very much an Emotions Anonymous issue that I suspect that there's a lot of us who have this. Anybody else have codependent issues here? See? Oh, that's the big one. That's the big one. Yeah. Cool. Love the hands. So codependency is a tough addiction to describe. I believe that it's a process addiction instead of a substance addiction. Instead of medicating myself with food, drugs, or TV, I got my escape by spending time thinking about other people or relationships. I found that I was constantly seeking approval from others for my self-worth and for my identity. That's why I was anxious. I was trying to get it from outside. I needed everyone to like me. No, I needed everyone to adore me, to revere me. Yeah, I wasn't just insecure, I was grasping, needy, wanting to be everyone's best friend. That was extremely painful, and I wasn't even conscious of it. Wasn't even conscious of it, it's just a habit. I still have this too. I'm getting better. I still have it. I find myself slipping outside of my body when I want somebody's approval. It's like I leave my body, and then I notice that I've left my body and bring myself back in. But I can do that now. Parties and social events were a particularly painful schizophrenic experience. On the one hand, I loved going because I could rush around, warmly gushing at people. And on the other hand, I was kind of like campaigning to be mayor, even though it was a social event. Okay? And I hated it because I also hated this weird caretaking compulsion that told me that I needed to connect with every single person that was there, otherwise I was somehow letting them down. And I wasn't even conscious of that until I went into Codependence Anonymous and Al-Anon and worked those two programs. My wife Shelley, God bless her, would patiently tell me every time to just relax and be with whoever I felt like being with and seeing whoever we happened to connect with. And then she had a great suggestion to start focusing on noticing other people and being with them, which was new for me. So sometimes I still don't know why she's still with me. She is. That's why when I came to Al-Anon, I was thunderstruck that the first step in Al-Anon, anybody know what the first step in Al-Anon reads? We admitted that we were powerless over? Alcohol. Yep. And then what's the first step in Coda? Anybody know that one? We admitted that we were powerless over? Others. Others. And that's a big one. We admitted that we're powerless over others and that our lives had become unmanageable because we were trying to control them, get what we needed from them, their attention. That was a big insight for me. Give up rescuing others, give up being a hero. That was the role that I'd taken on in my family when I was a kid. And so that's what it was. I was finally down to, was giving up the role of how I got accepted in my family. And to give up that mask, I could finally be loved for myself. So I started to work to gain sobriety from my habits of rescuing, craving for approval and to be liked, and I saw a huge gain in my sobriety because I'd finally seen those big parts of my pattern. I hope that that breakthrough would be the one that finally put me in a place where I never had to feel bad feelings again. Anybody ever have that crazy belief? But as you know, that didn't happen. I did not finally ascend perfected into the heavens. And instead, with all those different addictive medications gone, I was finally left without any medications between me and the raw anxiety I had felt about myself. That feeling of, I'm not okay. I'm broken, and if you see me the way that I am, you just won't like me. So I became very aware of these constant negative feelings. In fact, I was being overwhelmed by them. I had used counselors, meetings, journaling, energy work, prayer, meditation, Gestalt therapy groups, but somehow the pain of this old anxiety and shame seemed even more in my face. In fact, it now seemed that perhaps I was trying too hard, and that my struggle to feel better itself was even obsessive. I had no idea what to do. And then I came to Emotions Anonymous. Right away, when I heard about Emotions Anonymous, I got something. It clicked. I saw that while I had needed to stop all those addictive behaviors, that what I had been doing all of that time was trying to control my emotions with those behaviors, with those addictions. And now, with those addictions necessarily stopped, thank you God, thank you higher power, and thank you programs. With those, I was faced with my desire to constantly feel only good and not feel bad feelings. Anybody have that? My real recovery, accepting all of myself and actually being a friend with myself, began happening deeply right then in EA. In my first meetings, I looked around the room like a hawk. After all, who was likely to show up at an EA meeting? And of course, I found that everybody there had issues. I also was surprised to see what a great variety of issues we have. There's folks in EA who don't want to talk or even be seen. And then there's people who love to hear themselves talk, like me. So that actually works out quite well. There's people who have lived for a long time with textbook clinical diagnoses, and people who have just hit some kind of a bottom for the first time. They might have spent their lives believing that they're God's one example of perfection and only recently found out how ordinary they are. There's people who show up late all the time and the ones who show up a half an hour early every time to make sure that the rooms are open for the rest of us. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Sue. I did not expect to have my codependency issues so triggered in EA. But it makes sense, doesn't it? My raging caretaker shows up in a room full of emotionally needy people. Uh-oh. I can also experience discomfort when there's long silences. Good luck with that in a room full of people who are there because they're uncomfortable with themselves. But amazingly, everyone was so accepting, and although it took many meetings, I actually started to relax and to tell my real story. I found that I wasn't the only one with these issues. I remember that there's no one time in a meeting that I felt it was just a surreal meeting. Okay, just everybody was like I was. And then one of my new friends said, "Thank goodness there's no such thing as normal, so we've got nothing to compare to." Thank you, Dave.
It's a button on a wash machine, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He said normal is a button on a washing machine. And so that sparked me to create a new slogan, which I haven't shared with anybody till now. Here goes. Let he who is not neurotic cast the first judgment. So when I came into this program, I was very blessed first in finding a sponsor who had years of sobriety, who still diligently worked the steps. He immediately saw that I live in my head most of the time. He started inviting me to actually feel my feelings and just be present. It was great. It was great. I was doubly lucky because he initiated a weekly open breakfast for both fellowship and to continue the work on a 4-step guide that he called A Joyful and Uplifting Guide to the 4 Steps. He gave me this guide and he asked me to work it. I did this, and then I was surprised to find that for the first time, here was a 4-step guide that really fit my needs as a recovering emotional addict. The guide actually focused on the positive. It asked me to look for the good. So I'm pleased to say that by this time I was actually open to the process of doing a 4-step that looked at the good, and I needed it. While it asked me to list my shortcomings that kept me in pain, it spent more time guiding me to focus on the good. This including noticing the good part of my shortcomings and actually flipping those characteristics so that even now I can see my shortcomings as potential assets. Like staying up last night and working on this talk and only getting 5 hours of sleep. Clearly a slip in my perfectionism. But nonetheless, worthwhile because I care about giving my best self to you. And I know that higher power will do that anyway. So, like my sensitivity. My oversensitivity to people's opinions had caused me great pain, and yet hidden within them were great gifts in my sensitivity. Great gifts, which I will return to. So once I started to see my patterns of trying to control my emotions, the longer work was for me to try and change the core of my thinking and beliefs about myself. I had to actually start cutting my dependency on others for security, for approval, for permission, and for blessing. I needed to practice giving these things to myself. I needed to start being a friend to myself. Several times a day. Charlie, I want to take you aside here. Ooh, you're doing so good. You're doing so good. Good, Charlie. Yeah. Good, Charlie. I know you're scared. It's going to be okay. So I saw that all of my destructive mental habits were based on fear. I saw that these habits were so deeply rooted that they operate automatically, could only be changed by a complete transformation of my character. This character transformation could be accomplished by placing my shortcomings in the light along with the good. It took my total commitment to working my program plus grace. Plus grace. Grace is my higher power's response to my actions. I take steps, and God, the universe, love, takes big steps back. Big steps. I found that my shortcomings were being transformed. So for me, where did I find, what was this part that wouldn't let me feel good about myself? What is the root of my problem? What's my most malignant character defect? Self-hate. It's the opposite of self-love. It's a set of unconscious beliefs about myself, deeply rooted belief that is not true. In the face of complete success, I could still believe that I wasn't okay. Yet the EA Big Book told me that all these destructive beliefs are false. These beliefs were created early from somewhere in my childhood. There were significant influences like a lack of safety, shaming, and a programming in perfectionism that I got in my home. I do not take these experiences as a license either to be stuck in a victim mentality. About my parents, I know that my parents were caught in this disease much the same way as I was. It was passed on, and it has been passed on from generation to generation. I'm also not the first 12-stepper from other programs to finally discover that there was a deeper malaise at work that could only be faced after stopping my addictive behaviors. There's this guy, Bill W., founded a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And Bill W. woke up to the severity of his deeper emotional illness after 23 years of sobriety. In 1958, Bill W. wrote a semi-private letter which he addressed only to other AA old-timers. In this letter, he was honest. He talked about how even with all the promises that he had gained in his recovery, like abstinence from alcohol, a healing of relationships, success visibly in the world, he still had some kind of emotional illness, as he called it. He addressed this letter to old-timers only because he believed that only someone who had been working the program for a long time would have the sobriety and level of awareness to even begin to perceive what he was naming for the first time as perhaps his core disease, what he described as, quote, a lack of emotional sobriety. Bill W. never lived to see EA. He might have understood that the one thing that's different about EA is that it's the disease that we have gathered together to work on is that same core disease that he named. That's what we're here to do. That's what's different about us. We're working on the core illness here, this emotional malaise. These other addictions are very visible. Drinking all the time is visible. So is gambling, overworking, overeating, doing drugs. You get the idea. To see emotional addiction or emotional sobriety, you have to have some emotional sobriety. You have to be on the path a little bit to go, oh my God, look at how deep the roots go. Otherwise, our behaviors seem normal. And of course, it would seem normal if you come from a crazy family or from a crazy culture. So Bill W. called this insight the next frontier emotional sobriety. He then described some of the character defects that he found at the core of his emotional illness. Quote, suddenly I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence, on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things, according to my perfectionistic dreams and specifications, I had fought for them. And when defeat came, so came again my depression. Again, because I had over the years undergone a little spiritual development, the absolute quality of these frightful dependencies had never before been so starkly revealed, reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer. I found that I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these faulty emotional dependencies on people, even upon the program itself, and upon any set of circumstances whatsoever besides my higher power. Notice how he is finding that his emotional illness is based on the habits of what many of us would later call codependency. In other words, at the core of his emotional addiction were the codependent habits of dependency upon others for a feeling of security, being liked, as well as perfectionism. Bill's prescription was to turn the 12-step program back on his newly noticed core addictions. He says, quote, this seems to be the primary healing circuit, an outgoing love of God's creation and His people by means of which we avail ourselves of His love for us. It is most clear that the current can't flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken and broken at depth. Only then can we have a possibility of a glimmer of what adult love really is. Or to put it even more simply, in the same way that alcoholics have to stop drinking alcohol, emotional addicts have to cut their dependencies on others for validation, for security, and for the habit of using other people to reenact their dramas and their very belief in their brokenness. He concludes saying, quote, I think that the 12 steps can work towards gaining this emotional sobriety. If we examine every disturbance that we have, great or small, we'll find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and some consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may even be able to 12-step others into emotional sobriety. His words. So here are some questions by which to consider your emotional sobriety. Do you treat yourself well? Do you treat others better than you treat yourself? Do you feel afraid even though everything's okay? Are you reactive to other people's opinions? Do you have lingering feelings that all is not well? Some continuing sense of uneasiness, an ongoing sense of anxiety, a feeling of unworthiness? If so, we believe you might be an emotional addict. Now and then, out in the big world, these symptoms might be diagnosed as clinical depression, but understand that while Prozac and Zoloft might provide relief from the bodily sensations of the problem, they won't by themselves heal the patterns of mind and emotion beneath it. Only a spiritual awakening can do that. Bill W. didn't realize the challenge of his emotional disease until 23 years into his recovery from alcoholism. My story is similar, and I believe that the same is true for almost all the other folks who first have to recover from substance or process addictions. Only then can the core addiction be felt and seen. Then I had to wonder, why, since I was trying my very best in these programs, do I still experience anxiety and disease? And so that was when I heard about Emotions Anonymous. Yes, these steps had worked once to stop behaviors that had been destroying my life. Could I start all over again? God damn it! God damn it! Yes. Yes, I can do that. Yep. Can I admit that I'm powerless again, and this time at an even deeper level in my being, that I'm powerless not to some external substance or process, but to the very destructive momentum of my own character? Yes, I have to. I had to. I do. I'm not alone. Many of us never even become aware of the degree to which our habitual characters are trained into this emotional disease, this non-sobriety. And we have no idea of the depth of the emotional sobriety of happiness that is possible. Then, even if we do finally become aware, we might have no idea of how or that we can change. That's what EA is for. That's what EA is uniquely for. What is the nature of this emotional disease? It's not being able to feel good about ourselves. Now I have had many promises come true as a result of working the 12-step programs, other ones. For example, in years I have now been blessed with family and friends that are very loving and supportive. Yet, these loved ones have long had a better picture of me than I have of myself. I'm blessed to have had people that love me and bless me all the time. And for years I've been so uncomfortable with that love that when I hear it, I will change the subject, defer the compliment, or turn it back upon them saying, yeah, you've got that too. They were all signs of my emotional disease. I said before that I knew that my parents had caught this disease much in the same way that I did, that they just passed it on, and it's been passed on from generation to generation. And so the great importance of our work can be seen. We are the ones with an opportunity to break this chain of pain. And we are. It doesn't have to be passed on. And the glory that we are innately inside can be what we share instead. So that we no longer spread a disease through our thoughts, words, and actions, and we come to live at ease with ourselves. This new sobriety, this new ease with myself, requires that I give up perfectionism and naive beliefs, so that I accept that I will never be completely free of the core virus that's this disease in me. But it's enough to live in full remission. I can have recovery if I give up perfectionism. After all, if you're really a perfectionist, what is the only result possible? Failure, because nothing is ever good enough. So what is grace? Grace is when our higher power finally does what we cannot do alone. Grace requires changing our view sometimes of our higher power or God, What many of us see as God is just a projection of our own self-concept, and for a long time, my own self-hatred. By changing my concept of a higher power to one who wanted my happiness, who saw my goodness, who is always ready to support my healing, my blossoming, and my wholeness, then my faith and surrender actually opened the door to receiving grace. But action is necessary. Action is necessary. So what works? Our sustained work using proven program principles with the support of God and our fellows. My work is to love myself. This is actually at the center of my practice. I like that. Day by day, challenging the momentum of old thoughts and emotions, we support these new mental habits by doing program work, sharing and being in fellowship with recovery friends. We accept ourselves where we are right now, ending the internal conflict the moment that we accept ourselves again exactly as we are. And we must believe that we can become emotionally sober, that thinking these thoughts will start to shape our lives better immediately. One of the reasons that I say a little bit of a different introduction when I step into my group, I say I'm Charlie and I'm powerless over the initial arising of my emotions. And I say that because when my emotions come up, that's when I can start having a positive effect. Okay, oh, okay, that's what I've been thinking. I'm telling myself this again, and so I can start to have an effect. We have to do an inventory to understand our patterns. We have to share it with others. We have to become entirely ready to have these shortcomings removed. We have to actually ask God to take them away. For me, every day. We have to stay in fellowship, share what we've seen, and help others to see what they're doing. And we have to keep looking for the good, taking daily inventory and always looking at the good. Then we just notice that our characters are changing, including the things that we had nothing to do with that happened by grace. Thank you, higher power. Thank you, love. The truth is that I'm a good person. When I truly see you, I see the truth about you too. You're great. You're wonderful. You're lovely. You're perfect. So what have I found here in EA? I found that EA is radically different than other 12-step programs because it starts with my core impulse to avoid or control my emotions. I realized that my whole life I always had feelings of anxiety and shame. Every one of those addictive strategies I used to help change, avoid, or control my feelings, but I am in fact powerless over them, without help from my higher power and simple acceptance. That bugged me for a while, the fact that it was so simple. But it's actually like that was hard for my mind, and my identity is shifting. Somebody said, this is a new idea from Mike Obsatz from last night. He told me just a couple weeks ago that recovery is when the best part of you is in the driver's seat and the ego is in the back seat. We're not trying to kill the ego. We're not. The EA literature was clear. I learned for the first time that I'm powerless over the arising of my emotions, and that as a result of my dysfunctional way of coping with them, my life became unmanageable. Through EA, I had a further insight that my attempts to control or push away my so-called negative emotions actually made them stronger and more persistent. Anybody else notice that? What you resist persists. That was a big deal for me. For the first time, I was invited to look at feeling good all the time. I began to have the liberating experience that my thoughts and feelings are also not who I am. They're just part of my experience and meant to be helpful. In EA, I've started to think of my emotions as simply messages to pay attention to. They're like indicator lights on a dashboard. They're designed to get my attention. They can be loud. Prior to coming into EA, I saw them as either positive or negative experiences to either be avoided or craved. I actually used to believe that success was having only happy emotions. Ooh. Anybody else have that one? Yeah, good luck with it. The truth is that my emotions are just part of my experience. Feelings show me, for example, that I've just been triggered in some way, and I have a chance to look at what my trigger was. I may choose to then change the beliefs that are underneath them. Understood emotions are miraculous tools of awareness. So all in all, coming into EA was tremendously empowering. I met folks who had lives of peace and recovery. I built my faith that I can be peaceful too. The stories and tools that I heard shared at the EA meetings I can now use to flip my habits, like from fear and control, into trust and acceptance. So I've been much happier. I'm trusting the world and myself more. Things still come up, but I've got great new tools. So, my two favorite EA tools. Look for the good. If you had to tell one thing about EA, if you had to say one thing about EA, it's got to be look for the good. I just want to jump up and down and show my excitement about it because I think it's the heart of what works best in our program and in my recovery. I can never get enough of it, and I don't intend to. After all, the disease is still coming at us. The crud from the culture, the advertising, the media. We're not doing this to ourselves. We're being programmed still. And we have to, it's kind of like software. There's all this bad programming, viruses coming in from the culture, and EA is like an antivirus program. Here to help us clean up bad software. And we have to run our antivirus programs every day, because the crud comes in every day. But my absolutely favorite EA slogan is, just for today, I will try to adjust myself to what is and not force everything to adjust to my desires. This was actually a new idea to me. I thought my job was to change everything around me so that I could be happy. Somebody said good luck with that before. Who was that? Was that you? Did you say that again? Good luck with that?
Good luck with that.
Thank you. One last beautiful characteristic about EA. People. The beautiful people that I know in EA. I believe that we are beautifully sensitive. We have that in common. I've also learned from the EA Big Book that there are gifts in every character trait. So there must be powerful gifts in this sensitivity. We already know the 100 ways that our sensitivity can be a pain, right? After all, it's obvious that our emotional sensitivity is what drove us here in the first place. We found good tools now, though, and great help. We're doing much better. So it's time to pay attention to how this sensitivity is a blessing. Surely one of the ways that we're unique together is through our sensitive hearts. How we can be very, very vulnerable. There's no switch off to our awareness. From one day that we start being born to the end of our lives, the world pours through our senses, and there's no break. And many people's response is to medicate and shut down to not feel, because it's so much. What courage, what grace, what brilliance it takes to realize that these are sensations. I have the courage, I have my higher power, and I want to feel these feelings, to see this world and to see this day. What if our finely tuned sensitivity is now processed through our hearts? Couldn't it be there to serve a purpose? What if by facing our sensitivity we might unlock its gift? What if people with emotional illnesses and addictions are people who are more sensitive than the general population in a good way? It must be obvious to all of us that we're immersed in a culture which is deeply addictive, abusive, and destructive, not just to people, but to the natural world. What if deeply sensitive people find it hard to live inside of a dysfunctional culture? Without medication. What if our sensitivity is also a gift for recognizing that which should not be tolerated in the world and in ourselves? In that case, our sensitivity, once it's accepted and turned to the positive, is a highly tuned awareness for discerning the good from the ill, the skillful from the hurtful, which can now give us back a gift that we can share with the larger community. Because the world needs this. There are more broken people than I have seen in my lifetime. It's off the charts. This program is needed. So with our great sensitivity, we also find that we can read people very accurately. Once upon a time, we had to learn this great sensitivity to know how to stay safe around unsafe people. We suffered, and that gave us compassion and understanding. Sensitivity gives us the capacity to be very present and appreciative. To be more sensitive is to be more alive. When we surrender our fear of life, our great sensitivity is unleashed and becomes our clear connection to wonders, sensations, insights, and appreciations. I believe that if our great sensitivity is followed and not fought, trusted and not medicated, it can lead us into the deepest possible communion with the universe, our higher power, or God. By looking for the good, our great sensitivity is loved into the gift that it is meant to be. So how is EA unique? Right when you come in the door, you know this recovery work is about your core. Our primary mission is not to stop substance and process addictions. We're here to transform our relationships with our very mind and emotions. We're here to learn that we can handle our lives peacefully and powerfully. In fact, I'm convinced that our great hearts are powerful because of their great sensitivity. So what's the next step? That's the theme of our conference. Let's talk about the last step. There's something about the 12th step which I rarely hear talked about. As in, it's a place where you arrived. These steps actually go somewhere, and I'm not talking about back to step 1. What's at the top of a spiritual stairway? It's a landing, a higher vantage point. It's where we're meant to be in this moment. In this case, it's our spiritual awakening. We have all tasted some of this. Our spiritual awakening is a place that we can own. More importantly, it's a place that we must own. Did you notice yourself having any reaction to that sentence? Spiritual awakening is a place that we must own. This can be an uncomfortable thought. How many of us are waiting for awakening to happen? How many of us secretly believe that it's not for us? We've been told in lots of ways not to shine. But it's our shining that will really be helpful for people still caught up in darkness. And shining is the gift that we really want to give to ourselves, isn't it? We'd all probably agree that grace and healing are a gift, but what if there's a moment when it can only be claimed? What if wholeness is a gift and it still has to be claimed? Sitting at the desk, it's got your name on it. I get to decide that bus driving is perfect for me. I get to decide that my sensitivity is a gift. And who knows what other liberating gifts are just waiting to be claimed. And how about you? What gift is calling out for you to claim right now? We were raised inside of a restless culture. We've been very deeply trained in the habit of endlessly looking for happiness in the next thing. When was the last time that you saw a magazine ad, TV commercial, or radio billboard which said, "Good work, you made it, you can relax now, there's nothing else that you need to do. Nicely done, you can just be now"? I recommend that you do not wait for this advertisement. However, if you look closely at the language of step 12, you see this invitation to start being here now is right there. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we practice these principles in all our affairs. In other words, we've got enough. With these principles, we can just live now. Now that we've been shown how, it's time to trust, to practice just being, in the words of my mentor. So watch your mind's reaction again. Mine tries to tell me, that's too easy. Again, it's not surprising that it says that, because to a mind that has been long suffering, it is a radical idea that we can have a spiritual awakening and actually become happy people. The purpose of the 12 steps is not to go through the 12 steps. The purpose is spiritual awakening. Standing on the top of the 12 steps, we reach a high place of spiritual awakening. Why not stop and look around? Let's start with how far have you come? Where were you 6 months ago? A year ago? 5 years ago? 42 years ago? 45 years ago? What did you stop doing that used to hurt a lot? What are you doing now that brings you happiness? What have you let go of that makes you happier and more open? How have the promises come true for you? How do you carry the message to others who are still suffering? I know I'm happier now, and with permission to focus on the good, I can say to you in truth, after my daily inventory, I've been faithfully working to uncover the strengths of my heart for a long time. I'm basically playful in a good way. I love people, life, and love itself. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm loved. Other people we know are still living in dark places. We won't help them if we go back down to be in a dark place with them. We can help them because we've climbed some steps, because we found some light. In fact, the most powerful way that we can carry the message is to shine right here in the present moment when it feels right. We can then keep inviting others to join us and tell them how great it is to live in the light. So what's left after we start sharing the recovery that we've been given? What's left once we know that we're good people? We find that we're actually living the simple slogans that took thousands of repetitions to sink in. We're living one day at a time. We're letting go and letting God. We're living the promises. We find that we actually have a choice now, as in, just for today, I shall be unafraid. Particularly, I shall be unafraid to be happy, to enjoy what is good, what is beautiful, and what is lovely in life. I'm very grateful for you and to walk this path with you. So please take care to be gentle with yourselves and the people that are around you. Thank you.